Hello everybody and welcome to another video. So in this video we're going to be talking a little bit about my hopes and predictions for the Horus Heresy 3rd edition, what I really want them to do in regards to the rules, and potentially new other model kits that we're potentially going to see. Yeah, so the Horus Heresy 3rd edition is pretty much on its way. We don't fully know when it's going to be out yet. They haven't really tinted that. They haven't even said it's going to go on pre-order soon. I'm probably expecting it to drop sometime in July, to be honest. Otherwise, we'd have probably started having the articles rolling out, and they haven't really done that. They're only the articles seem to be mainly around about the characters that we see in the intro. We just had Valdo, and one of the battles, the Knights. Silent Sisters is going to be talked about next week for the Heresy Thursday. So they're kind of sort of just padding this out until they can actually start talking about the actual edition itself. But yeah, so what are my hopes and predictions? On the rules wise, the fact of what they've shown us so far has me on the fence. I'm happy that the core mechanics of the game is going to be staying the same. So your ballistic skill, your weapon skill, your strength and toughness charts, and everything else seems to be staying. Now, one of the things I'm hoping that they do is retain armor values for vehicles. I think it would be a shame if armor values and facings, especially arcs of fire, are removed from the game. One of the things that I'm not a big fan of in 40k is the fact that the vehicle, and we've got a tank right here, basically has a 360 degree arc of fire. So regardless of how the tank is positioned on the table, you're always going to just hit it, and it is always going to be able to fire at you. I think this is one of the things I'm not a big fan of when it comes to 40k, because it kind of makes the player not really care about the positioning of the tank. And in older editions of 40k, you would be able to kind of sort of position the vehicle in the most advantageous position for yourself, and especially when we had rules that not so much in 7th edition and sort of later editions of 40k, before obviously the big change in regards to 8th. You used to, when you get into combat with a tank, you used to hit that facing. I think it was in 7th edition, possibly 6th edition, they changed that to the point that you would, if you got into combat with a vehicle, you'd always strike its rear armor. And that was one rule I never really liked, because I don't really understand the concept behind it. I understand that it was kind of to make vehicles a little bit more easier to kill in combat, but it doesn't make a sense. If I run up to a Challenger 2 tank and start hitting it at the front, there's no real difference from me hitting at the front to hitting it at the rear. I'm going to do superficial damage to it in the long run. Obviously, weaponry in 40k is a lot different. So one of the things I am hoping is that they retain the armor values of the vehicles, and firing arcs. I really do not want them to lose firing arcs. Firing arcs are fun. They're a kind of a core part of 40k, as well as Warhammer Fantasy Battle. You've got that 45 degree arc coming out. If you kind of look at the vehicle like that, you kind of have like the lines, the cross coming down through it. So you have the front arc, the rear arc, and the 2 side arcs. I want them to retain that, because it kind of makes things like turrets, pintle mounted weapons that are just at the front of vehicles. It means that they're a little bit more visually and narratively correct. So I can have my Land Raider with all the guns at the front, facing you and firing at you, rather than it just sort of like being back to front and my guns are somehow firing from the front but still hitting you you're from behind. I don't really like that part. I understand why that's the case in 40k, because 40k is more of a abstract sort of tactical competitive game, where the Heresy isn't. It's more of a narrative driven focused war game. You're not going to see Napoleonic players have their cannons facing the other direction and then shooting people from behind with them. You know, the cannonballs doing this kind of sort of thing. That's not kind of how that works. So let's kind of retain that in the Horus Heresy. I hope initiative steps and combat stay. Now, there's no indication to say that this isn't going to be the case, because the initiative stat is still in the profile, and they've talked about some of the weapons by minusing that or modifying it to a point. So I'm hopefully that the initiative steps of combat are still there. Maybe it'll be a little bit more finesse and fine tuned in regards to things like unwieldy and things like that won't be a thing anymore. So you're gonna kind of just sort of like, rather than be like, yeah, I'm gonna power fist, I'm always initiative 1, you're gonna be maybe go in there and like your character and the weapon that they're using with the modifiers might mean that you're still hitting on initiative 3, and that could be interesting. And that kind of dynamic with certain characters being a little bit slower than others could be quite interesting as well. I can really sort of see something like Vulcan being a little bit slower than, say, Ferrus Manus. Even though they're wielding 2 big hammers themselves, I can kind of sort of visualize that there would be a difference in speed in regards to that. And then on the flip side, you'll have Fulgrim, who should be, rather than minus modifiers in to certain things in combat, he should be plus modifiers to his initiative. So yeah, that's hoping that stays. Big thing here is, for me, is the Force Organization chart. And I think this is probably one of the things that a lot of people are really, really worried about right now, is regarding the Force Organization chart of the game and army composition. They've kind of alluded to it that it's still there, but they've also said that the army building has been massively changed in regards to it. Now, I'm probably close and on the money when I think that it's probably going to be a little bit like 40k, where you're going to be very free and you're probably going to have that rule of 3 built into it. So you're not going to be able to bring more than 3 of the same unit. And you'll probably get bonuses if you have a pure army made of all of the same thing. And when I say the same thing, I don't mean like allies and stuff like that, or the sort of, you can just bring out whatever you want, which is something that they did bring in the 7th edition, and no one really used it because it was a little bit silly. But I can kind of see this being very much open, like 40k. I'm hoping it's not. I'm hoping that there is an element of a Force Organization chart still in the game. But we'll have to see on how that's working. You know, that kind of element would be kind of really cool. And then lastly, I think one of the biggest things I hope is likes of Rights of War is still in the game. The ability to have a rule that will allow you to theme your army. And I think this would go a long way for army construction of sort of curbing the spam. Because if you allow players just to take whatever they want, and the penalties to do so are very minimal, then you're going to get horrible, stupid spam lists. And that's, one, is just going to have a detrimental effect on the game and what it looks like. And yeah, that's not fun. It's not fun to play against. It's not really fun to sort of look at the table. One of the things about Heresy that is really cool is that you get a very visually impactful army on the table, where it is a lot of combined arms. You'll have different types of infantry with vehicles and tanks and all of that kind of cool stuff, and they look like proper armies. Where 40k, you don't really get that. 40k is, these are the cool units, these are the best units, this is what we're taking, because that's kind of how that game works. Where Heresy is very different, you know, you get that sort of combined arms feel with the armies. And I'm hopefully the army construction still keeps that, as well as sort of like having that Rights of War, where you do get a bonus. Maybe, I don't know, you get bonuses to certain stats, or your 4 new stats if you take a certain thing. I'm sure they've probably worked something out. But yeah, also one of the things that I didn't talk about in the last video is it looks like we're getting arcane journals. They shown one of them, and it's kind of like the campaign books seem to be like arcane journals now. And they're going to have the rules in them for different things, which is kind of cool. And that's a good way of them being able to bring that sort of the character element to the game. So I'll be interested to see how they work. That's going to be kind of interesting. But yeah, obviously we're still very much have no idea what they're doing because they're not really talking about it right now. And I'm intrigued to see what they are going to do in regards to the rules. Now, kits wise and everything else, they've kind of shown us the Mark II Assault Marines, the Breachers, and all of that. I hope that we get more Primarchs, new Primarch sculpts. I'd like to see a new Dawn. I'd like to see a new Gilliman. I'd like to see a new Fulgrim before he's corrupted. I don't think we will. A new Lehman Russ would be kind of awesome. I do think we'll see a Magnus and Mortorian Demon Primarch at some stage in the future. And obviously the Emperor of Mankind. I massively think the reason why the Talons of the Emperor do not have a book straight away is because the Emperor of Mankind is going to be in it. And that's going to be a really big thing probably next year for the Heresy in regards to that sort of big release. I think he is going to be on the tabletop. And the reason why I will keep saying this is purely because we have Horus Ascended. You can't have Horus Ascended and not have the Emperor. That's kind of one half of the fight, and you need the Emperor there to finish that fight off. So yeah, I'm really hoping that that's the reason why the Talons of the Emperor are not got a book yet, is because, you know, if they drop that day one of 3rd edition, then we know he's coming. And I think that's I think the Emperor getting a miniature and rules is going to be such a huge thing for the Heresy and 40k and Games Workshop as a whole, because like it's the Emperor of Mankind. He is the big guy of the setting. It's how everything sort of pans around what he did, and the story element of the Emperor. So yeah, getting a miniature for the Emperor like that, he's such an iconic character from all of the artwork. That is going to be a big one, and I think they are going to do it. I 100% think they are going to do it, and I think that's the reason why we haven't seen them yet. Yeah, obviously the spear as well. 100% that's the first female Custodi miniature we're going to get. And I think that's going to be the case as well. So, and I'm hoping as well that when they also come out, that we start seeing plastic versions of their tanks. And I'm sure 40k Custodi players will be rejoice at that, because if that's the case, I then hope that they do allow the 40k players to use those vehicles in their games of 40k, because the Custodi army will benefit it massively from that. But yeah, that's what I think kits wise. There's obviously a Whirlwind coming because it's in the trailer, and there's probably a few other bits and pieces. But I do expect to see more tanks, more plastic tanks, and yeah, that's it. And I hope we do actually see a Salamander Praetor, a World Eaters Praetor, a Raven Guard Praetor, and yeah, that's it, because we've had the Iron Hands and the Iron Warriors. But it's going to be interesting. The two poster children for the edition is now 2 different legions. So it's super exciting for that. But anyway, that's my rambling. That's my hopes and predictions for it. I'm sure over the next couple of weeks, once they actually start talking about the edition, we will then start getting a better picture. But as soon as they start dropping these articles, I will cover them in depth, having a little chat about it. looking at what that means, how it's probably going to work, and kind of trying to fill in the gaps that they often always put into these articles. But yeah, but if you are liking what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share, and all of that good stuff. And I will catch you in the next video. Goodbye for now.